In this episode, we talk about the malfunction of the PSLV rocket that led to the failure of ISRO's 101st mission. We also talk about the ordeal of a Dalit woman who was wrongly accused of theft. But first, we talk about the multi-party delegation which will help the government in its global outreach post the Pahalgam terror attack. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda and you are listening to 3 Things, the Indian Express news show. As part of its efforts to rally global support for India's fight against terrorism originating from Pakistan, the government announced last week that 7 multi-party delegations would visit various countries to convey India's message in the aftermath of Pahalgam terror attack and Operation Sindoor. These 7 delegations will travel to 32 countries in a bid to isolate Pakistan on the global stage and make it clear to foreign governments that India has long been a victim of terrorism sponsored by its neighbour. What's also worth noting is that these delegations include MPs from across party lines and that 3 of them will be led by senior opposition leaders, including Congress's Shashi Tharoor. A move that has brought into focus a possible rift within the party. To understand these tensions and what the delegations hope to achieve, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to Manoj CG, Chief of the National Political Bureau at the Indian Express.
Manoj, can you give some historical context for this move? Like, how common is it for the government to pull together a multi-party delegation like this?
To send a multi-party delegation like this to almost 32 countries, to brief the MPs, their think tanks, even prominent journalists, hold these media interactions there to as many as 32 countries plus the European Union. It's a big initiative. It's not completely unprecedented in that sense because if you remember in 1994, P.V. Narasimha Rao, as the Prime Minister, he had sent a delegation. That was one delegation headed by then opposition leader Atal Bihari Vajpayee. That was to Geneva, where Pakistan had brought a resolution to censure India, alleging human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir and all that. So the brief of that delegation, it was again a multi-party delegation, a bipartisan delegation, to counter the Pakistan narrative and the resolution. And they did it successfully. They thwarted that resolution. Even that delegation had people like Farooq Abdullah, Salman Khurshid from Congress. He was then Minister of State in the Narasimha Rao government. So that was a completely, an all-party kind of a delegation. This time it's different because there are multiple delegations.
Right, and we understand that altogether these delegations will include some 51 politicians. But are all of them MPs in this case?
So some of them are not MPs, but most of them are MPs. For instance, Salman Khurshid is not an MP, Ghulam Nabi Azad, MJ Akbar, they're not MPs anymore. But most of them, if you look at the composition of these delegations, most of them are MPs. The idea is just to convey India's message right from the Pahalgam terror attack and how New Delhi perceives that we have always said that India is a victim of terrorism emanating from Pakistan soil. The Pahalgam attack happened. After that, India struck terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan soil. So you need to put all this in a context and explain it to, foreign capitals. Already, as we know, External Affairs Minister S. Shashank has had a series of telephonic conversations with, his counterparts from almost every big country. So this is a follow-up to that. This also shows that in India, there is a unity on the issue of terrorism across party lines. So that's why 3 of these delegations are headed by, opposition MPs. One, Mr. Shashi Tharoor, and then NCP SPs Supriya Sule and DMK's Kanimuri. The rest of the 4 delegations are headed by 2 from BJP, Baijan Panda and Ravi Shankar Prasad, and one by Shrikant Shinde of the Shiv Sena, one by JDU's Sanjay Yadav. So it's an effort to show that domestically there is a consensus. Across party lines, we all believe that India is a victim of terrorism emanating from Pakistan soil, right from, Parliament attack, the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks, up till the Pahalgam attack. So that is a basic idea behind this. When the country has to put across a narrative, it is done at best at this level because initially there was a plan to send special envoys to countries. The government then subsequently decided that this would be better because it can also showcase the domestic consensus.
And just from the diplomatic point of view, how important is it for India to send this message across to the world, especially now?
It's very important. If you look at the countries that we have chosen, barring China, these delegations will be going to all the P5 countries. And significant Indonesia, for instance. It has the largest Muslim population, and to many countries of Europe. Because the world generally talks about tensions between India and Pakistan. So there is a sort of hyphenation. It's just like Russia and Ukraine. So this is an important step in that sense to dehyphenate, to tell the world that you cannot equate or you cannot see India and Pakistan, you cannot talk about these countries in the same breath. You cannot equate India and Pakistan because one is an exporter of terrorism and one a victim of terrorism. So that narrative India has to convey to the world.
And talking about the domestic politics back home, do we have a sense of why the government picked these three opposition leaders to head the delegations? Shashi Tharoor, Supriya Sule and Kanimuri?
So, except for Mr. Tharoor from the Congress, I think the idea was because DMK is the third largest party from the opposition. So, it's but natural that one person from the DMK is chosen. And, the whole, right from Operation Sindoor, the way people were killed in front of their families and wives in Pahalgam. So, that's why the operation itself was named as Operation Sindoor. So, the government must have thought that there should be a representation for women as well. So both of them are articulate, Supriya Sule and Kanimuri, and coming from opposition parties. So that would be one calculation. Congress, of course, has to be accommodated, and Mr. Tharoor has been one of the most articulate voices telling the world. He has been giving interviews, to a number of foreign outlets, telling the world, as I told you, about how India's actions are in retaliation to terror, emanating from Pakistani soil. And it's not aggression. India, does not want to alter Pakistan's geography. India does not want anything from Pakistan. The strategic objective behind the operation was just to, destroy terror infrastructure, and Indian security forces have not hit military installations or civilians. So he has been articulating this despite being in the opposition, and across the world he has given interviews to European outlets, to American outlets. So he has emerged as one of the most influential voices, conveying India's position. So, but obvious that he would be one of the picks by the government.
And it's interesting because some people within his party thought that, the way he was articulating his points, it was as if he was supporting the current government. And this was happening at a time when a lot of Congress leaders were criticizing the BJP, saying that it's politicizing this issue. And later, several members of the Congress, even criticized the government, saying that after Operation Sindoor, why only NDA chief ministers were briefed.
All that started happening post, the government is still not calling it ceasefire, at least post a cessation of firing and, military conflict between India and Pakistan. So on the day the ceasefire was announced, one of the first reactions came from Mr. Tharoor. He kind of welcomed it. He again put across that point that India never wanted to attack Pakistan or its military installations or its civilians. India's strategic objective was just to hit terror installations, terror infrastructure. And when Pakistan agreed they wanted a ceasefire, India agreed because that was the message that India at the government level and at the military level has also been conveying, that if you stop, we will stop. It was a one-off operation against terrorist infrastructure. So Tharoor had conveyed this point in as many words in an interview to the Indian Express as well. But the Congress party was on a different level where they were questioning how US President Donald Trump could have announced a ceasefire. Why not by the Indian government or the Pakistani government?
Right, because we first heard about the ceasefire through one of the social media posts of President Donald Trump.
Yes. So the Congress argument was that the Narendra Modi government succumbed or buckled under pressure from the US and agreed for a ceasefire. So, there is a divergence in these two narratives, these 2 points articulated by Mr. Tharoor and the party. So that's where the differences started coming up. So much so that after a meeting of the top Congress leaders in Delhi, one of the leaders told, of course he did not want to be identified, told reporters that Tharoor has breached the Lakshman Rekha and all. And then following that happened this, a telephonic call from Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiran Rijiju to Mr. Tharoor and to 3 other leaders of the Congress, to Mr. Salman Khurshid, to Mr. Manish Tiwari and to Mr. Amar Singh, inviting them to be part of the delegations. Which, of course, the Congress found it inappropriate because they felt the call should have come to the party, not to these MPs directly, and the party would have nominated them or any other 4 persons. The Congress argument is that it's a prerogative of the party. These are Congress MPs. It's the prerogative of the party to give the name to the government if at all the government wanted participation of the Congress in these delegations.
And what has been Tharoor's reaction to this?
Tharoor immediately welcomed it. On Saturday, when the government announced the formation of these 7 delegations, and Mr. Tharoor was heading one delegation, he immediately welcomed it. He said, I'm honored to be part of this exercise. And he said, in national interest, when the country wants me to do something, I'm always there. The others did not immediately react because the composition of the committee, the delegations came much later towards the end. So there is a grouse that the party has. One of the grouses is that Tharoor did not inform the party. At least we don't know. We have not heard on the record from both the sides. But one view within the Congress conveyed to us on condition of anonymity is that Tharoor did not inform the party about the call that he has received from the government, and he did not inform the party before accepting that to be heading a delegation.
And so does this show a possible rift between Tharoor and his party? Because, there have been murmurs about this in the past as well, right?
It has been there for quite some time. Way back in 2015, when a year after Narendra Modi government came to power, Tharoor had praised a couple of initiatives, including Swachh Bharat, then announced by the government. And he had taken a line then that you cannot criticize the government every step of the way. So if you appreciate the good initiatives, then the mismanagement cutting across, be it on foreign policy, be it on economic. So this mismanagement, when we call out, will look credible. So that was way back in 2015, and he continued to hold the same view even till now. So this so-called rift, it may have aggravated now, but he has taken an independent line. For instance, parliament disruptions. So he has always maintained, he has spoken about it within party fora as well, that he was not in favor of disruptions. He says it, robs the time, the valuable, precious time of members, including question hour, 0 hour, from articulating their point of view, raising the concerns of their constituency and forcing the government to give an answer. So on many of these issues, he and the party were not on the same page. But now it has kind of aggravated.
And besides Congress, one of the members of the Trinamool Congress was also included in the delegation, right? But we understand that he was pulled out. Can you tell us what happened there?
So Yusuf Pathan, one of their MPs, was included in one of the delegations. And the Trinamool Congress pulled out, saying the government cannot decide which MP from the Trinamool Congress would join the delegation. Almost a similar argument that the Congress has made. The government should have reached out to the Trinamool Congress, its parliamentary leadership or its leadership, and asked for a name 1 or 2, and we would have given the name. Because these are Trinamool Congress MPs, we would decide who should go. So they have pulled out their representative from the delegation.
Right, and even as we speak, there are reports that now actually Abhishek Banerjee, the second in command in the TMC, will be part of this delegation instead of Yusuf Pathan. And this apparently happened after Kiran Rijiju spoke to Mamata Banerjee and she recommended Abhishek's name. Now, is this what Congress would have wanted to do as well?
Congress, of course, would want these 4 not to be part of it, off the record. But now there is, little choice. The ideal situation for the Congress, from the Congress point of view, is that these 4 would have told the Parliamentary Affairs Minister that consult the party, they will give the names. If my name is there in the list, I will go. Otherwise, I will not. But I am told a couple of the MPs the government contacted did tell the Parliamentary Affairs Minister that I am willing to come, but speak to the party as well. But of course, the Congress would like that to happen, but they will not say it publicly. And that did not happen as well.
Moving on from India's global outreach, we now talk about the ISRO's 101st mission. In what was a rare incident for the Indian Space Research Organization, its main rocket, the PSLV, developed problems just few minutes after takeoff and failed to place a satellite into its intended orbit on Sunday. This was ISRO's 101st mission, and its failure came as a surprise given that the PSLV is ISRO's most successful launch vehicle and is widely considered as its workhorse. To understand more about the mission and what might have caused the failure, we are joined by the Indian Express's Anonna Dutt. Anonna, what do we know about what happened on Sunday when ISRO launched this mission?
So it's still not clear what exactly happened, but what we saw is a perfect launch. The vehicle took off as usual. PSLV is a very dependable vehicle. We've done several launches with this vehicle, and it took off as it does and functioned well till about the second stage of this 4-stage vehicle. So in the third stage, soon after the third stage of the rocket took over, there was a drop. So the altitude of the vehicle did not correspond with what is the estimated trajectory. And that's when we knew that there was something wrong. ISRO released a very brief statement saying due to observations in the third stage, the mission could not be accomplished. From what I have heard is there is a committee that is now looking at this failure. So usually after any ISRO failure, it sets up a failure assessment committee, and they will come up with what exactly are the reasons that led to this failure.
And this was ISRO's 101st mission, where it was attempting to launch the EOS-09 satellite. Can you tell us what this satellite was meant to do?
So EOS-9 is essentially an Earth observation satellite. It's a synthetic aperture radar, which essentially takes pictures of the surface of the Earth, and it's positioned in such a manner that at the same time every day it would take a picture of the same place on Earth. So Earth observation satellites can have various uses. It can tell you, for example, what the forest cover is, what are the kind of land changes that are happening. It can tell you about soil health. So it has a lot of applications, and this satellite is meant to be all-weather. So it would be able to produce these images irrespective of what kind of weather there is over the area. And this mission particularly was a repeat mission of EOS-04. So what this means is the technology is the same on both, and EOS-04 was launched in 2022. This particular satellite will just enhance the capability of that. So the frequency of observations that are made on Earth, that would go up with EOS-09. And the mission would have lasted for 5 years.
And Anonna, we understand that the PSLV is one of the most trusted launch vehicles for the ISRO. But have similar incidents happened before as well?
So, PSLV is a very dependable launch vehicle. In fact, it is one of the globally most successful vehicles ever. Since the beginning, since the first launch that happened, the PSLV so far has failed only thrice, the third being the current mission. The first failure was, of course, way back when the first development flight of the vehicle took place. The second failure happened in 2017, where the heat shield on top of the satellite refused to open, so the mission could not place the satellite in orbit. And now this is the third failure, and we are yet to know what exactly caused this failure. Unfortunately, this failure also comes at the heels of the 100th mission of ISRO, which also failed to place the satellite in the correct orbit. It's not the same vehicle, that was a GSLV launcher, but the satellite was placed in a slightly wrong orbit, making it not entirely useful. So the satellite was an NVS satellite, which is from a navigation constellation. And it was placed in a wrong orbit, making it impossible to use it throughout the day, like ISRO envisioned. In fact, this constellation has had its share of bad luck. The 2017 failure of PSLV that I talked about was also another satellite meant for the same constellation. So there have been a series of bad luck with the NVS satellites. And now we see another PSLV failure, but we will come to know what happened during this, launch with a very, very dependable vehicle.
And this incident now has raised concerns, more so for those who have worked closely on the mission. Talk about what the space experts have to say about this.
See, anybody who's working in the space domain knows that it's a very fickle field. Like, you can have hundreds of success and yet you can get another failure. PSLV, like I said, has been a very dependable vehicle. So, it failing is something that comes as a surprise for most people. But nobody will, of course, be blaming the space agency for it, because they know how, difficult it is to send even a routine mission up to space. So, people who worked with the agency, people who have worked in space domain have just said that, it's just another learning opportunity for ISRO, and they would not have another failure like this because it has a mechanism that looks at every failure and ensures that it doesn't take place again. And, in fact, S. Somnath, the previous chairman of the agency, also said, setbacks like this only make ISRO stronger. And, over the years, he said that such challenges have strengthened the conviction of ISRO, and it has never considered failure to be a defeat. So that has been the kind of reaction that we saw from everybody working in the domain.
And Anonna, besides all this, these missions often leave behind a lot of debris, which usually marks the end of the satellite's journey. But we understand that the creators of EOS-09 had planned to prevent that, right?
So yes, now the problem is that with the number of satellites growing in the low Earth orbit, so if you think of any of these internet providers such as Starlink or OneWeb, all of these are a lot of small satellites in the low Earth orbit. So this orbit is getting crowded, and now more and more there's a need felt to ensure that none of the missions leave behind debris in this orbit so that it can be fully utilized. And as part of its commitment, these are international commitments that every space agency has. ISRO has been deorbiting its satellites for a couple of years now. So what they do is essentially, after the mission life of a satellite is over, if there is fuel left over, then they try to steer it closer to Earth. So they deorbit the satellite so that after, within a couple of years, it just falls into the Earth's atmosphere and burns up. So that there is no debris left over in this low Earth orbit. But when it comes to this specific 101st mission, ISRO it had planned to do these maneuvers as part of the mission. So instead of thinking that, okay, if there is fuel left over, we will deorbit it, they had provisioned some fuel just for this, meaning after the 5-year mission life, once the satellite stopped working, they would have brought it down closer to the Earth and let it be there for it to fall into the atmosphere.
And now, how do we see this mission going forward? Does the ISRO have any plans on trying it again?
So ISRO usually has a calendar of the missions that it would launch, and of course so soon after a failure they wouldn't have the exact same mission ready to go. But there are several Earth observation satellites that ISRO usually launches in routine, but right now this year the focus is mainly on the big missions such as NISAR, which is a satellite that India has collaborated with NASA on, and it's basically again another type of Earth observation satellite, but it is a very high quality satellite which has been designed mainly to look at the impact of climate change over the years. So this would be one of the satellites that ISRO focuses on next. And of course, there's a lot of work that is going on the human space flight as well. So there are going to be a lot of tests, and even likely the first unmanned mission under Gaganyaan, which could happen this year itself.
And in the end, we talk about the treatment of a Dalit woman in police custody over what turned out to be a false case of theft. The incident has triggered widespread protests in Kerala after the woman recounted her ordeal to the media on Monday. The Indian Express's Shaju Philip reported that following the protests, a sub-inspector was suspended over lapses in taking the woman into custody without conducting any preliminary inquiry. According to Shaju, on 23rd April, the Thiruvananthapuram City Police had registered a case pertaining to theft of 18 grams of gold from a house where the woman worked as a domestic help. On the same evening, she was summoned to the police station where she said she was examined by a policewoman to see if she had concealed the stolen item in her body. Shaju quoted her saying, "I pleaded with police that I had not stolen the chain and the pendant. After the police could not recover anything from me, they took me to a house for a search. I was then taken back to the police station where I was forced to remain an entire night. I wasn't given food or water and was not allowed to sleep. When I sought drinking water, they told me to get it from the toilet." However, the next day, the complainant informed the police that the stolen gold was found misplaced at their home, following which the woman was released from police custody. Shaju writes that later she submitted separate complaints with the Chief Minister's political secretary, P. Sasi, the state's police chief and the SC/ST Commission. Within a few days, an assistant commissioner of police recorded her statement and promised action. With this promised action now allegedly delayed, she told reporters on Monday about the ordeal that she went through. Subsequently, City Police suspended Inspector S.G. Prasad for lapses in taking the woman into custody without a preliminary probe. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava and me, Niharika, Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.